You're now plugged in to the Delphi podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Delphi podcast. Today, I am delighted to have Jiho on the show of Sky Mavis, developers of Axie Infinity, very much the team that kind of gave the activation energy to this entire sector of gaming and kind of kicked it all off. So, Jiho, it's a pleasure to have you here. Excited to dig in.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, super excited today to be digging into all things Ronin and, some exciting upcoming developments in terms of things going permissionless, but wanted to kind of stage set for those that somehow may not have been following along for kind of the broader arc of the Ronin legacy. Like, maybe we can just take a step back and you can give us, I know it's been quite a wild journey, but maybe you can give us the super high level of way back, starting with Axie, all the way through to where we are now. Like, what are some of the kind of key milestones as you see it? Maybe you could kind of just, fill us in on that broad arc to kind of stage set for people before we dig in.
Yeah, for sure. So the story of Ronin really starts with Axie Infinity. And so Axie has obviously gone on to make quite a name for itself. It's in the Guinness Book of World Records now as the #1 NFT project by all-time trading volume. But once upon a time, it was just this idea of a creature collecting battling game on Ethereum. Basically, many of the early team members, founders, community members met while playing CryptoKitties and kind of had this idea of a game that could really show what a blockchain powered game could be. But so this all started out in 2018. But while we built out Axie, we realized that one, Ethereum was not built to accommodate gaming, and that two, like a lot of the tools and infrastructure that we needed to build a blockchain game hadn't been created yet, right? So we actually had the experience of trying to build Axie on a very early Ethereum scaling solution called Loom Network. This might be like a blast from the past for some people, but this was like kind of state of the art scaling technology back then. They had Georgios working on it. It seemed very promising, but it just didn't really work out, right? So we kind of learned this lesson that, hey, you don't want to build your startup on top of someone else's startup. So we decided, hey, no one's going to be able to build a gaming chain like us because we're basically the only Web3 game developers that have had this experience of building for a live community. So we decided to do it ourselves. We built Ronin to be the gaming chain that we needed for Axie. And so when we deployed Axie to Ronin, Axie's experienced exponential growth. It's, what I like to say is Axie was the first game to experience the Ronin effect, right? So within 6 or 9 months of deploying Axie onto Ronin, Axie went from 19,000 DAU to 2.8 million DAU and basically generated $1 billion in revenue. And so so that's that was the story. That was the story of Axie and Ronin in the beginning, and then I think the next chapter, right, is obviously there's a bear market. Everything is got a bit deflated, but there were teams that were interested in now building on the Ronin networks, saying, hey, we know that this infrastructure accommodated Axie's exponential rise. That's more than you can say for basically any other blockchain. And right, this team, right, they probably have a lot of insights on what went well, what didn't go well, right? A lot of basically insights into how to run a live economy, how to actually operate a Web3 game. So one of those teams was Pixels. So Pixels, I think that's really like the second inflection point where Pixels deployed onto Ronin from Polygon, went from 5,000 to 1 million plus DAU, generated a ton of revenue. We're able to get on to become a Binance Launchpad project. So I think that was like the second major inflection point. That was November 2023 roughly, and a couple of months onward. I think that was the second inflection point that then brought in the second generation of amazing builders, teams like Fableborn, Forgotten Runeverse, Cambria, what have you.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm curious then, like, what was that sort of initial phase like? We often talk about in the games industry where people like nailed the killer product right and then pivot into building out sort of platform or infra layer as well, right? Steam and Half-Life 2, Epic Games with Fortnite. what did that early period look like, I guess, in terms of saying, okay, we've kind of proven, we validated this. Like, talk me through the like decision to, kind of like the curated approach when you guys were initially looking at it. Like, what were those early conversations in 2023 like? Like, what were the kind of things that you were looking for? And yeah, would love to just get a bit more about your kind of thinking on how you were going to navigate this. Like, it's a pretty big deal, right? Like the next sort of title that you launch and make a big push on. And obviously there was, huge success in doing that with Pixels, but would love to understand a bit more about the thinking at the time, and so we can sort of track how that's evolved.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so basically, when we decided to go get into basically the business of publishing games using our infrastructure, we had a fork in the road to choose. Would we, right, kind of spray and pray, give out a lot of grants, and just basically take a lot of shots on goal? You can make the argument, right, that sounds like the smarter approach, right? Don't pick winners. Game industry is a hits-driven business, right? Like, just make sure that, right, you have enough shots on goal that a few land. We decided to go with a different approach. We felt like we had the ability to pick winners, having been a winner ourselves. That we felt like we could pick teams that had the right combination of technical ability, leadership, Web3 incentive understanding. And that was also right, like what we felt like we had to do, because we weren't going to be able to compete with some of these huge other chains that had these ecosystem funds that were in the hundred, almost like in the billions of dollars. Why? Because they're not like gaming specific, right? So we felt like our approach had to be quality over quantity. And I think that had a lot of like important implications down the line. So yeah, we chose to go with like a smaller number upfront of teams, and that we would basically work really heavily and take a hands-on approach with these teams. And so that's what we did, right? Like, so we worked heavily with teams like Pixels, helping them, right, like with their go-to-market, teach, answering questions around incentive design and basically releasing a token, things like that. So that was our strategy. We felt like it was right for us, where we felt like we had this very specific knowledge, and right, we could basically anoint a few good teams, and see, hey, are our hypotheses working? Are we able to actually venture into this games publishing business? And so far it's worked so far. But now, right, like we're now on the precipice of maybe the third inflection point, which is the opening up of Ronin, where we go from this curated approach, where we're basically only working and having a certain number of teams that we really believe in deploy on Ronin, to now just right letting it rip, right, where it's become too much work, and to try and like control all this entropy of, right, like basically making it so that every single team that wants to deploy on Ronin would have to talk to us and kind of go through some sort of a vetting process. We feel like we've now become the bottleneck, and it's time to remove ourselves as that bottleneck and just see what happens as we open up the network.
I'm curious, is there some element of like obviously sort of trade-offs come with this? I mean, you working so closely with these teams had the added benefit of, you guys are able to sort of invest in them, like, basically capture some upside from like their individual successes as well. Like, is that something you guys worry about being diminished now, or are you still looking to kind of work very closely with a particular kind of golden cohort or whatever? Would love to understand how that piece has evolved, because I know for a long time you guys are able to, basically command pretty attractive terms in terms of engaging these teams early and help, king make them, as you say, anoint them. Curious how that piece is evolving.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring this up, because this is something that we want to be really clear on, is that even though we're opening up Ronin, we will still be investing in and publishing certain select teams that we think are really great. It's just that, right, like there will be more of a ability to almost audition as well for this direct publishing relationship by just being on Ronin, and gaining traction on Ronin before you kind of get on our radar. Whereas in the past it was like, hey, get traction on some other chain, Polygon, what Treasure, whatever, and then if you do well there, you can come over. I think it's going to be a little bit different and more open, and I think just better for Ronin if that kind of trial period happens on Ronin. But we will still be investing and publishing games, because a lot of the value add that we bring as game publishers is not just, hey, like you guys are whitelisted to deploy on Ronin, right? It comes with the advisory on token go to market, uh using all of our channels, right? We have millions of emails, right? That people don't necessarily know about this or talk about it enough, but we have millions of emails, right, from over the years that we're able to leverage for these games as they come on the chain. And those are the types of things, right? There are certain, like, basically benefits that only direct publishing games have access to.
Absolutely. And so you kind of touched on this notion that there's, you guys felt like you were becoming a bit of a bottleneck with this curated approach, and there was a ton of sort of demand to open up. Like, I'm curious, yeah, whether there's anything beyond that you can touch on to answer the kind of like, why now, right? Obviously, you have this, like, I mean, a ton of projects that I'm insanely excited about. We were on a Spaces last week, right, touching on a few of them. I think you have an incredibly strong cohort, which are a really cool blend of, like, representative of each sort of genre that's going to do, well, I think it's going to do really well, in the Web3 gaming space. But yeah, like the why now question, I'm curious, because obviously we've had a lot of teams building throughout all of these years, like lots of things that are meant to be coming to market now. Was it like a function of something in broader, like, market structure that you guys were seeing with a number of projects coming out as well? Would love to understand a bit more about, yeah, why now, early 2025 was the time to pull the trigger on this.
Yeah, I think for us, right, we're seeing that, with the new administration, there's this golden window to really seize the moment. And right, that, I think the rationale that just makes sense to us is, like, if Sky Mavis applied to build on Ronin today, would they make it? If the next Sky Mavis, right, it's like maybe a team that isn't super experienced, but has something interesting or unique. We feel like our ability to screen everything, just right by, you can basically just, by the sheer number of applications that we have to screen, right, that's like one metric that's going through the roof. I think also, right, like, market environment where we're anticipating a very strong H2. I think, like, it's like right now, like Q1, maybe looking a little bit dicey, but I think H2, we should start to see Bitcoin dominance trending down, and that would we would basically, like, we're predicting, I would say, that we'll start to see, like, as rates start to come down, the spread between the federal funds rate and, like, basically yield on Ethereum should start to diverge. That basically starts to get more on-chain TVL in the Ethereum ecosystem. And I think, like, hopefully basically contributes to a decreasing Bitcoin dominance ratio. Better for alts, better for gaming, right? Historically, what you saw, gaming season, right, the very exponential phase of gaming season happened from May 2021 to November of 2021, right? So that'd be, like, basically H2, and kind of line up with that. And yeah, we haven't really seen, like, the perfect market structure for gaming yet, which I think is good in some ways, where you would basically want to see Bitcoin having gone on a huge run and starting to make trend towards 40% dominance, where it's right now, I believe, like 62% BTC dominance was really, really high and not indicative of the end of a bull market or anything like that.
Absolutely. Well, inshallah, let's see. Excited for all of that to come. One of the other pieces I'm curious on as well is, like, you guys kind of, wrote the playbook in terms of, bringing a community along for a ride, right? There's a ton of people that, had tremendous success within your ecosystem. It kind of evoked this insane loyalty and evangelism. I think that's part of why, we've seen this continued success into Ronin, right? Where all of your early curated mints, things like that, were complete sellouts, right? Everyone was, like, hungry for the next thing because they trusted you guys to deliver on, basically the curation aspect and bring more strong products into the ecosystem. I think we've continued to see that, right? Like, you see these projects that come in and launch and do their mints and stuff is going really well. Like, there's this concept that this notion that as you kind of go permissionless and open up, it's like more people kind of competing for the same pool of players. I'm curious, like, what your take on that is, as more projects come into the ecosystem, and as with crypto broadly, like, attention scarcity, trying to play these games is hard enough. Like, how do you think about that within the Ronin ecosystem, in the absence of huge new player growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a sign of people projecting the current uh, situation to go indefinitely into the future. Whereas, we've had experience with these 0 to 1 inflection points where something gets invented through pressure and competition and teams innovating that then uh, gets the space to the next level, right? That was like SLP and play to earn with Axie, VIP system with Pixels. So the way that I see it is that the more good projects and the higher shipping velocity of quality economic experiments with these in-game economies, obviously, right? Like the games are getting better. We know that the games are getting like a lot better every year, basically almost month by month. But the thing that will likely, right, like unlock the next crazy hyperbolic growth moment that brings in net new users will likely be related to some sort of token incentive refinement. So I think like, for us, we want Ronin to be home to the most sophisticated experiments in Web3 gaming incentives. And right, the more teams we have, like the more teams we have shipping out unique experiments and designs, I think that's just gonna help everyone and get more data and this is like a chance where it's like more shots on when it comes to these economic experiments. That's what gets us to like the next kind of 0 to 1 moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. I just see like, I'm in some ways concerned when we look at the broader gaming market, right, which feels a little jaded, right? There's like only so much liquidity that's like aping every new thing, and seems somewhat dilutive and a bit PvP at the moment. Some of these recent launches that we've seen, not necessarily on Ronin, but just broadly, and so it's something I'm tracking. But certainly, big believer we're going to see a strong uptick in this, and the products are here now, like when the next wave of broader attention comes into this space. So definitely feeling good on that front. I'm curious then, like, as times evolved and you've learned more working from these teams, like I said last week when we were chatting, that I really think Ronin has kind of nailed this, like very token literate teams, kind of more like mid-core casual stuff. We've seen some really amazing products coming out. But like, what are some of the key traits that you are looking for in founders of gaming projects these days? Like, what are the things that seem to have ticked the boxes and have delivered success so far? Would love to understand, yeah, how those insights of yours have evolved.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are certain characteristics that we look for in the founding teams, right? It could be the founder, if there's one, or the founding team in general. Um, I tend to think that having at least two, right, maybe very, very highly incentivized team members, whether they're founders or executives, is helpful. But yeah, generally we're looking for founders that have great leadership skills, right? So people say we need like a guy who's in the trenches or good at community building. I think that actually what you really need is someone who understands how to lead people, someone who understands how to communicate expectations, to under promise and over deliver, someone who can set a direction for the entire community to basically get in line and move in one common unified step. So I think that's important. uh, we're also looking for teams that have at least someone on the founding team that has technical chops, because right, like you don't want people who are just selling air, right? Like you could have someone who's really great leadership skills, but if they don't actually have the ability to deliver what they're the vision that they're setting, right, that gets into dangerous territory, right? So basically, right, like teams that can build and teams that can sell. And that's very, very, very rare to find in founders, especially Web3 gamer founders, where they're either like typically great at building games or more on the technical side, or to like kind of just salesmen, right? But it's hard to find either founders that are both, or founding teams that have both, kind of evened out amongst them. Um, so yeah, I think like teams that you either want them to have you want also like some well balanced some balance, right, between Web3 experience as well as the ability to actually make games. So teams like Fableborn are pretty rare and awesome when we find them, where it's like, hey, they've been familiar with crypto for a while, but also have a tons of experience building mobile free to play games. That's something pretty rare, but when we see something like that, our eyes light up. Luke, right, is another founder that comes to mind, where he has an engineering background, but he's also great at he studied computer science, economics, right? So he has an understanding of incentives. He's great with the community. Um, so yeah, it's kind of like that's what we've seen to be working.
Absolutely. No, very very excited for Fableborn. I got to say, Fableborn, yeah, love Cam, love what he's doing. Yeah, I was stoked to see, going to token launch and turning on some of those sort of like growth
Mm.
flywheels as well. Already the kind of play
I
test, all
mean,
the metrics
yeah.
around this thing have been insane in the absence of that. So
I
who
need
knows
I
what's
needed
gonna
to
happen
come
with
back,
things.
man. I was actually playing so much that my wife was watching me, and she said that I was so good that she was like really impressed. I was like, I don't think I wasn't that amazing,
That,
but it's like interesting that that game, when women watch you play that game, they think that you're really good at playing games relative to other games out there, right? Because I guess it's like you have to have like some dexterity, like you're dodging a ton of stuff. You look like you're a really good gamer if you're like decent, I guess, at Fable.
that's that's funny. That's why she's your wife, I suppose. Hype beast, hyping you up there. I love
No,
that.
but she's not always like that, right?
No, no, I
Sometimes
guess
she'll
you
be like,
could.
"Oh, this game is boring," or right, or she'll
Yeah.
just stop watching, right?
Yeah, there you go. The other one on Ronin that I'm super excited about is Cambria. I love what those guys are doing. I think it's yeah. We've been talking about the old, on-chain RuneScape thesis for so many years, and Cambria's yeah, I mean Ben is crushing it on that front. So yeah, very excited to see what comes with that. Yeah, I guess we kind of touched on then like yeah, sort of what you're looking for in founders for the ecosystem. I guess I'd also be curious to get your perspective on like from almost the founder's view, what are they looking for in an ecosystem, right? Like, obviously, you guys were sort of so early to this gaming like thesis. You guys obviously delivered an insane product, have a ton of learnings that comes with that. But like, I mean, yeah, how are you guys looking to sort of like more longer term kind of differentiate in this very saturated infrastructure landscape? You may have seen that last year there were like more gaming chains launched than products, right? Which is just an insane reality that we've been confronted with. So yeah, I'd love to understand just your view on that kind of trend and like, if you're a founder approaching this now, like, what are you looking for and how's Ronin looking to stand out?
Yeah, sure. I think founders come to us for a variety of reasons. I think foremost is our expertise and how we can help with distribution. This is like in two ways, right? One is obviously just advice and sharing our learnings. And then, the second way is, right, just leveraging all of our different channels and basically all of the mini platforms that are kind of vertically integrated to make up Ronin, right? Whether that's discovery through the Ronin wallet, the Mavis marketplace, our millions of emails, right? Our socials, right? All the founder channels. Those are kind of right the mechanical elements that make up the Ronin effect. And I think they're also looking for very responsive DevRel, to be honest, right? Where it's like, hey, right, a lot of this stuff they're gonna need to ask questions, when they're building. So it's like how scalable can you make that, right? For some of our right, like this is also a reason that having a direct publishing relationship with us is helpful, right? Because like obviously our engineers and DevRel people can be like way more give way more attention to them. But I also think that our docs are pretty good and getting better every day. But so I think that's another thing, right? Is like the chain infrastructure needs to work, and if they have questions, they want to right basically get handheld a little bit, when it relates to basically getting it up and running. So I think those are the big things. I think another thing is around basically around token stuff. Right. So I think this is also why, right, like we worked well together, right? Where it's like, we love teams that are working with Delphi because we know that they're also getting another pair of eyes on their token design, helping with the token go to market and stuff like that. So yeah, I think like game economy design, token design, advice on listing strategy, things like that. That's another key aspect that people are looking at from basically our publishing and yeah, from our publishing side of things, right? So there's kind of right like some things that everyone can get on Ronin just by being on Ronin, especially once Ronin opens up, and then there are certain things, right, that you have to be a bit closer to us, to go through basically the publishing uh, platform offering to really get like full access to.
Absolutely. And then I guess just additionally, one thing that like for a period of time seemed to govern every single conversation I was having with founders when we had, I used to refer to it as the grant wars, like these big ecosystems that had a ton of cash that were just chucking around like pretty insane incentives for teams to come over and try and like, do BD that way. I think that's since kind of recessed a bit. But would love to understand like yeah, just any of like high level thoughts on that kind of period that we saw, and also how does that translate into now? Like I think most people have really wisened up about like how and when grants could and should be used, but like what does that look like for you guys, especially going permissionless now? Like how do you think through all of that?
I think we were in a very good position to sidestep that battle. Why? Well, one is like we didn't have the cash to be able to right fight that war and have some asymmetric advantage, so we decided not to fight it and to choose another way of winning. So it was by necessity. Two, from experience. We once upon a time, right? Axie was that game that was searching for a chain, and we realized, right, that if you choose based on any other factor other than hey, this is the chain that's gonna make me a commercial success, right? It's like, what are you gonna do? Like, you're gonna optimize for a couple $1 million, maybe $10 million, and uh, maybe not, and but also be faced with a chain that's not fit for gaming, not fit for your project community, and also maybe be your potential downfall, right? Like we got offered $10 million grants from EOS, right? Imagine if we taken those from Axie, right?
Good times.
And many other chains that are, I won't mention because they're still around or whatever, right? But we'd gone through that and we were like, hey, like this sounds like right, like okay, we can de-risk ourselves for a year or two. That maybe sounds nice if we're afraid, but if you live and make your decisions out of fear, you're not going to be able to right like get that huge outcome, which right any founder should realistically be aiming for.
Totally. No, makes sense, and as I say, glad to see that that's evolved somewhat. I do
And
think
that's
we've
not
got
to
a
say,
few.
right, that that's not to say that we don't have grants, right? Obviously, we have grants, we will make investments, right? But we're not looking to right compete in size or right like we're looking to compete in terms of what we can do uh and provide to make your game a success, right? We want Ronin to be the best place to build, grow, monetize Web3 games, and offering huge, crazy grants, right? That's not that's not that's a false requirement, right?
Mhm. Absolutely makes sense. We touched on a few games that you're kind of excited about, a couple specific ones earlier, but yeah, I think like zooming out a little bit, what are some of the kind of themes or trends you're seeing around, where kind of crypto gaming is, that you're excited by, right? Like whether that's, thematic genre stuff or some of this AI infusion. I'd love to know some stuff that you're seeing in the market or that you're looking for in the market that's exciting you.
Yeah, I mean, I think things that we're bullish on are like minimum viable MMOs, right? So it's like basically Web3 gaming has been a thing for about 4 or 5 years now, right? So it's like we from the beginning have known that MMOs just make sense, but it takes some time, right? It takes some time to build one out. So it's kind of like my like little pet phrase is minimum viable MMOs. We're starting to see some of them get on the market. We're starting to see some of them do volume. So that's your, Forgotten Runiverses, your Lumiteras, your Cambrias, for example. Next is kind of the, yeah, like mobile, mid-core, maybe like your ARPGs. Right, Fableborn comes to mind where it's like uh, mobile, so it's going to be very accessible to our user base. It's going to have like short, punchy sessions, yeah, so like mid-core ARPGs, games that are gonna have like 10 to 15 minute, perhaps even shorter, session times, really snappy play sessions. But also, right, like having this ability to have like some sort of a progression system that allows for like syncing of tokens. So those are some of the, so that's that's what we're kind of seeing right now. Um, you know, I'm personally right like less bullish on yeah, well, I'm not gonna say what I'm less bullish on, but yeah, I think that those specifically I also think that like browser based games, right? Because are have an interestingly good position, right? Where it's like very accessible. You can play it on both a phone or a desktop, and yeah, you're able to play some of these like kind of relatively basic MMOs out of browsers now. So.
Absolutely. I guess kind of like following on from that as well, I'm curious also what you're seeing in terms of some of the kind of token innovation and different approaches to managing that side of things with these sort of like on-chain game economies. Like, yeah, what are some of the things that you're seeing that people are trying that, seem to hold promise? Some of the stuff that, stood out to me even around like, Fableborn, for example, having these more sort of like time boxed events, right, which give you much more control over like inflation adjustments, all these kind of things like seasonal wipes. We're starting to see people tinker with these types of things more and more. But yeah, curious what you've seen across the breadth of the kind of Ronin ecosystem that's interesting to you right now.
So some things that I'm seeing is teams getting way more dialed in when it comes to measuring basically like ROAS, right? So it's like basically return on token spend. So it's like, okay, you're emitting tokens. What are you getting? You're getting some right social engagement, mind share, some revenue, and you're able to basically emit these tokens in a way that maximizes the future market cap of your token. So I'm starting to see teams get really scientific with this. Um, we actually did, have made a lot of progression on the Axie side, right? Because remember, we still continue to tinker and learn with Axie and bring those types of learnings to the rest of the Ronin games and kind of vice versa, right? There are a lot of things that we learned from Pixels that we implemented in Axie that improved its economy. So I think that's another like amazing like aspect of Ronin ecosystem is like right the knowledge sharing. It's almost like early Silicon Valley where you have this Ronin mafia of founders that are all performing these economic experiments, and it's like hey like right like we'll if we invent something or if we come up with something, we're gonna share it with you, and there's the understanding that it goes both ways. So I think yeah, just getting really dialed in on basically return on token spend. Um, we're seeing more variations of the play to airdrop as well. I think as you mentioned, right, like just the very time box events, dynamic NFTs, right? So I think like I saw, I was pleased to see like Fableborn having like kind of the upgradable land. So that's something actually that we made with Axie, where Axies now can be upgraded over time. And in order, basically, you need to burn tokens to make them more powerful, more beautiful, and able to earn more. And that's a mechanic, right, where that we're starting to see, right? Because like it used to be, right, that NFTs were about like breeding, right? So it's like you would earn tokens and use them to breed, and you just have this kind of horizontally expanding base of NFTs. But I think like the future, you might still have those types of mechanics, and I think they still work in certain games. But I'm more interested in like vertical progression of NFTs, right? Where you're basically earning tokens and using them to make your existing NFTs more powerful. I'm pretty sure right, that Fableborn will be doing stuff like that. Once they have the loot system out, and you can basically earn equipment for your avatar. So I think that's going to be a game changer as well, because right there's no real like character progression system aside from the XP, which I guess has been getting wiped anyway, right? So I think that's going to be like a game changer for Fableborn, and it's like kind of related to the enthusiasm that I have for those types of dynamic progression systems for NFTs in general. We haven't seen one of those like really, really be like the game changer or some kind of hyperbolic growth catalyst or lever, but those are the types of mechanics that we need, right, to make these game economies more resilient and kind of less prone to market fluctuations.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I'll definitely keep an eye out of things that affect. I also want to get your view on like just updated most recent thoughts on sort of like play to earn as a category, right? Like a lot of people love to do the whole play to earn things over, but I think we're still seeing a ton of enduring success and activity and excitement from lots of different founders around this. So would love your high level view on that, and then kind of have a follow up I want to dig into as well.
Yeah, play to earn is evolving. It continues to evolve and get better on the Ronin network. Right, like we went through the whole play to airdrop phase, right, which is really just play to earn, just with kind of like predetermined amounts and a predetermined time window. So I see play to earn getting better with every iteration. Um, Teams are getting a lot more data. They're getting a lot smarter with how they're distributing these incentives. And I mean, why would you question play to earn when right there are teams that are airdropping 50% of their supply on day one, right? It's like um it's from first principles, right? It's like, okay, if nobody mines Bitcoin, Bitcoin is dead. Therefore, we're emitting mining rewards, right? Same thing in the game, right? It's like nobody's playing your game, then you're dead. Therefore, right, like we're emitting these rewards. No one's making content for your game, right? If no one is like thinking long term. So it's just a better way of sharing upside in a project with your player base, with your golden cohort, mate, right? Like eventually, it's not going to be right that eventually it's not going to be that like every single generation of user that plays this game is definitely going to be able to have a huge outcome, right? That's not how it's going to be, but I think Web3 gaming, the play to earn is really about like allowing your golden cohort to grow with you and to basically dedicate more of their life to the game, right? That was the thing that we saw with Axie, is like there were people who were just able to justify to their friends and family members why they were spending so much time on the internet because of this. They would have played for probably for a lot of them would have played for free, but the fact that they were able to get a little something out of it, right? It's like helps when you're negotiating for video game time with your wife, right?
Totally. I love that. I love that framing. Yeah, one of the things I'm also curious for your view on is like one of the areas that I like, is starting to warm up. We're seeing so much like on-chain experimentation around the whole like agentic piece of things, right? I haven't yet seen like the huge, strong, like, products where that's like been firmly integrated with games, but obviously people are working on it and there's lots of exciting stuff happening. Tin from Cypher's a great example of someone that's like, really building this kind of into the game design itself. Like, yeah, I'm curious how something like that, eventually intersects with this notion of emissions and rewards and trying to get people aligned, right? Because I feel like
Yeah,
either that can happen inadvertently, or people can try and build it into the game itself and have like your agents basically participating in a similar fashion, and then the whole strategy becomes who can optimize and prompt and manage this portfolio of agents as well. Like, yeah, just curious for any of your thoughts on that, because I think it's quite an interesting area that I'm excited by, and is still very early days.
so yeah, I think that we're thinking in the similar direction, where I think the most interesting line of opportunity for these agents in game is for them to be like quest masters, right? Where instead of you getting like some predetermined line of questing or whatever, uh, you're basically getting an agent that is going to be giving you quests and deals that are really catered to your player archetype and your reputation. Um, and so yeah, I think like basically around like giving out quests and giving out rewards as well as like balancing these economies, I think like that's I think where some of the fertile ground is. I think we'll just need to see some experiments out there. Like I think like to be honest, the first version of this would be, hey, you have this quest system, just like maybe like set some have some AI, right? Some relatively primitive AI that's kind of like auto balancing it or whatever. And then okay, boom, you just take that quest system and uh put it inside the brain of some NPC that's in the game. You give it a text wrapper or whatever, an LLM. And then people are able to interact with that agent rather than having to navigate outside of the game to go to the on-chain questing platform, right?
Totally. Yeah. Excited for all to come. I think we'll see quite a few examples of this, hopefully not too late into the year. I know several projects starting to look at things from that perspective. So yeah, I guess, obviously nailed things with Axie with the Ronin launch. Had this initial sort of 2023 going into 2024, ton of momentum with this first cohort, really kind of illustrated the Ronin effect extends beyond Axie to all the world. Now you find yourselves with this really strong cohort that are sort of all coming to market, play tests or live in the next few months of this like very curated approach. Now heading into the permissionless phase, as you're kind of anticipating, coinciding with favorable market setup for gaming broadly, with all these products coming to market as well. Like, playing this forward a bit, I know it's a dangerous thing to do in crypto. But yeah, what does Ronin look like in like 2 to 3 years in an ideal scenario for you guys from here?
So yeah, we like to think of Ronin as king of the gaming chains. We would like, ideally, we continue to do really well within the Web3 gaming sector, have dominant amount of mind share as well as liquidity and player numbers. Um, but yeah, hopefully, maybe there's also other chains, right? Like, because if we're the only ones, that might mean that that the market is still relatively small. Um, I would want to see some really interesting advancements when it comes to play to earn and token emissions. I feel like there's still a lot to be uncracked, kind of unraveled there or unleashed. And as I said, right, I suspect that how we get to the next level involves right evolution of these token incentive models. And yeah, I would want to see multiple games, right? And Axie got to a 7-digit user base, right? Like it was with Pixels. And so like, Axie and Pixels both hit millions of DAU. I would want to see right games in the 8 digits, right? 10 million plus. Um, I would want to see Ronin, in the top most used blockchains globally by basically almost every metric that you look at. Right now, we're the fourth most used blockchain in 2024 by active, unique active addresses. I would also want us to be up there when it comes to TVL, volume transferred on chain, number of significant or non, I guess non-zero transactions. So yeah, I think we're doing well when it comes to engagement, but I would also want to see us, basically up there with the titans when it comes to like things like TVL and volume transferred. So
I love that. I'm also curious for your view on like I feel like you've got this brilliant audience of people that are really, really leaning into the sort of on-chain pieces available that really want to, like fully embrace crypto gaming as opposed to the more sort of lighter touch economy integrations that we might see with a more like quote unquote AAA approach. You probably know I'm a bit of a Gunzilla fanboy with OTG and what they're trying to do. Like, how much of what you'd hope to see in the next few years also stems from like more traditional publishers or traditional IP kind of wading in? Because I feel like you guys kind of are validating all of your stuff independent of that. So just curious on your view of that overall, because obviously we've got some big stuff like Maple Story, even eFrontier, and now stuff like OTG as well. Like, curious how much of that is part of what's interesting to you guys or exciting.
So we have a few bets in this direction, mostly around the Ragnarok online universe, right? So we have Ragnarok Landverse, which is basically the classic Ragnarok MMO, which and is like enjoyed by millions still. But I think they're doing something really unique and interesting, where it's like, hey, they're opening up one or two. They're just opening up NFT servers, right? So it's like, hey, you want to play the old classic Ragnarok or whatever? You don't like NFTs? Like, it's okay. Like, you can just go play on the normal server. You don't have to do anything. Nothing has to change for you. But hey, if you want to experiment, and potentially experience some of the benefits of crypto and Web3 blockchain, try out this new server. So yeah, that's an experiment kind of in that direction that we're really excited about. And I have some inklings that this will work, because I've heard anecdotally that actually Ragnarok guilds is one of the ways that a lot of people got onboarded to Axie last cycle, right? People would be talking within their Ragnarok guilds and be like, hey, we're also playing this game or whatever. And there's actually a famous streamer named Myrtle in the Philippines. She does like stuff with Blizzard, right? She's like a mainstream streamer, right? And a TikToker. And it was actually her, and she was actually running a Ragnarok guild. It was her who was her like guildmates who basically onboarded her, right? So a lot of these things, right, that we'll hopefully see more of in the future, with like basically just like traditional normal Web2 gamers, normal or streamers, right? A lot of this has happened on Ronin, but primarily right in Southeast Asia and the Philippines. So it will happen. Yeah, I think it takes the right like market conditions, the right IPs. But yeah, so that's one thing to keep an eye out for is basically like the Ragnarok universe. We have Ragnarok Monster World, which is more of like a mobile game, kind of like tower defense, kind of like Clash of Clans, or Clash Royale, and then yeah, and then we also have Landverse, which is basically going to be like NFT servers of the classic Ragnarok.
Dude, dude,
And
I love this approach. I was pitching RuneScape on the same thing some time ago, right? You have like your serverless, especially if you have game worlds or economies that are very much adjacent to like real world trade. There are some kind of secondary gray markets, right? Like if you have, a new server where whatever, you have like a stat white, but it says like, it's a real money trade world or like an on-chain world, and basically allow people that are playing games that, already have a sort of like proclivity or tendency towards having, some material dollar value to in-game economies and stuff, where people understand this stuff, and alongside that give them the ability to test this stuff out and like understand the ownership and the kind of economic agency without having to go and trade outside of the games. Like I think that's an incredibly powerful onboarding. Still working on it, still working on the RuneScape front, but I think that would be really cool. Excited to keep an eye on that in the Ronin ecosystem.
yeah, I think that approach with the kind of parallel servers, it's like a Gresham's law but with servers, right? It's like, oh,
Hmm.
if the harder money, the harder items are on one server, like theoretically people would migrate over, right?
I love that. I love that. Yes, sir. Let's let's see. Fingers crossed. Excited to see more on that front for some of these big IPs that can bring over, mega audiences. Yeah, I guess yeah, would love to kind of ask you just some sort of higher level questions as well. Like obviously being a hell of a ride from Axie into Ronin and kind of all of the sort of stuff you guys have had to navigate along the way. Like, I'm curious if you have anything you can share just in terms of like reconciling, a bit more like long-term thinking around building an ecosystem in a game versus kind of the, you know, ADHD nature of this market where you have a lot of short-termism from market participants. Like it's been epic to watch you guys kind of weather various storms and build this epic trajectory for Ronin. Like, yeah, curious what you can share just for people interested and perhaps for other builders who are, having a dark night of the soul because gaming's been a little challenging of late.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, do company planning, whether that's 1 year planning, right? I mean, at the beginning, it's probably gonna be like 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, 1 year. But I think that was something that we, started doing in 2019. At that time, it felt late, but we do like, some sort of annual structured-ish planning cycle with, something like akin to OKRs or whatever you want to call it. So I don't know. That's maybe like some, I'm gonna try to give boring advice because feel like that's I usually give like weird advice. So yeah, I think like do definitely do company planning. Yeah, don't just straight get kind of courted by the new shiny object, right? Don't be don't chase the herd. Don't try to chase the meta. We saw this right with everyone like migrate trying to do Telegram games. Yeah, I think Telegram games are cool, but I think like a lot of people like put way too much of their hopes and dreams on them
For
after
sure.
seeing like one or two successes. So don't get farmed like that. Um, so yeah, I mean for us, whenever we go through hard times, it's just like, okay, how do you, buckle down and just go on a winning streak of making the right move, X number of times in a row, right? Um, and yeah, I think like, you need to go to the gym, right? You need to have a supportive friends and family, maybe a significant other, a wife, or something like that, right? It's important in this space to basically have like a strong mental base because you're going to be getting like a lot of like pressure from everyone, from investors, from the community members. Community members much worse than than the investors. Investors are typically pretty chill, but from angry community members, from very excited community members. So yeah, just be sure that for us, like one thing that we learned was, or like you have to make sure that people don't have expectations of you that aren't possible, and that basically you align on what people should expect of you. When someone knows what to expect of you and you are aware that they're expecting that and you're okay with it, that's actually called an agreement, right? So always like say this to my team is like agreements over expectations, because expectations, right, it's like it's almost impossible to win when you have all these right expectations that you can never meet, right? um so it's like you should promise right? Like people know what you're promising, right? And be very explicit about that. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think like another thing, right, is like speed in this space. You need to like be able to ship stuff and kill it, and ship stuff and learn like really quickly. Even much more so than maybe even in a traditional startup. To be honest, I'm not sure. I never really did a series, too large. But the speed of shipping and iteration needs to be, and learning just needs to be astronomical. So, yeah.
I love that. I love that. Some good learnings in there. Yeah, I think particularly agree on the sort of just expectation management around shipping things. I think what I've seen over the last couple of years as well is just like it's been. I think a lot of these ambitious product roadmaps, like I think community was a bit naive. Maybe the developers were too, on like how
Yeah,
easy
that's
it
what
would be to
happens
hit the
too when you
deadline.
have that's why I feel blessed, right? That we have a well-rounded founding team, right? Because if it was just me, like I wouldn't know, right? Like I'm not an engineer. And so
Mm.
when I came into the space, I was like, I need to attach myself to a team that can really fucking build. Otherwise, I'm gonna sell something too well, right? And I'm gonna get myself into a situation that I don't want to be in, right? So that was my number one thing when I got into the space. Like, I need to find a team that can actually deliver what
Mhm.
we're talking about into the world.
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, I'm also curious, as a very experienced builder, you've been on this kind of crazy journey. I've been asking people of late what their favorite crypto learnings were, but I think people who have really been through it, I kind of want to ask like if there's a sort of developer war story that comes to mind. Ars Technica did this series that I loved, where they'd go and talk about, in the traditional games industry, sort of crunch times, all this crazy shit when things went wrong. I mean, I think a couple of particular points come to mind in terms of your journey that you've been on, like with Ronin and with Axie and everything. Like, yeah, curious if there's a story that comes to mind that you can share as well for other builders and people curious.
I think like one of the hard things in starting any type of company is getting your first 100 users, getting your first right like 100 to 500 users. I think there's a lot of people who know how to go from like 10,000 to 50,000, 10,000 to 100,000. But I think like the people who know how to go from 0 to 1,000 is kind of a much more select group. So yeah, in the early days, right? It's like in the early days we used to manually recruit people to play our game, right? So I feel like right now, like there's actually a lot of founders that should be trying to manually recruit gamers, right? They're just kind of like, oh, there's no players, there are no players, they're all on Ronin or or something like that, right?
Right.
Um, so in the early days of Axie, it was like, okay, who might be interested in this thing? Okay, well, there's only two other NFT projects, Decentraland and CryptoKitties. So let's go into their Discord and manually bring them into ours. So we would like basically give Axies out. Um, we would give a lot of gifts. We did a thing where every Decentraland landholder got free Axies. The top people, we ran like, we pulled the data from CryptoKitties Discord to see who are the most active chatters. All right, let's get them all like in the Axie Discord, right? So kind of like this almost manual. Right now, people try to do like vampire attacks like via incentives and airdrops or something like that, right? Whereas yeah, we're doing it like pretty manually, like in the trenches. Um, so yeah, that was all back in the days, right? 2018, where I would look at the Google Analytics and it'd be one person on the site, and I would close my tab and it's like zero. It was like literally I was the person on the site
Yeah.
at 4 a.m. So yeah, I think like that. And that approach to getting your initial users, that's not like unique to Web3. That's something that Paul Graham has written about. So I would also say that a lot of people are like, oh, none of the old school Silicon Valley startup advice works. That's not actually true. Like the writings from Paul Graham, like the very early Web2 era, like 2003 to 2006, like that golden age, try to read like Paul Graham from back then. That's gonna be really helpful to Web3 builders. Someone, I can't remember who it was, the early investor in OpenSea sent those over to us as a founding team when we were just like before we had even done our first fundraise. And I went through a lot of that, and yeah, Paul Graham's advice. I think this is also my ebook. Paul Graham's advice like really works for crypto and Web3.
Of that, yeah, he's put out a ton of brilliant writings over the years. Might need to digest them a bit more effectively with all of our new AI tooling these days. But yeah, I also wanted to ask, like, where's your head at on all things the metaverse, right? Obviously this is this amazing confluence of forces that gave rise to this kind of crazy run, like obviously within crypto, but way beyond it as well. A lot of it was kind of hijacked and used for gimmicky stuff, but I still think a lot of the core ideals and ethos is 100% relevant in the kind of the world that we're heading towards. I think a lot of the sort of messaging that you guys adopted with Axie and a digital nation, and I think more recently there's a lot of stuff that's been dropped in terms of Balaji with the network state and whatnot of this kind of world that we're working towards. Like what are Jiho's thoughts these days?
We're spending more time we're spending more time online, right? So it's hard to say. Like obviously, like people got a bit carried away back in 21. So it's hard to really say how it will play out, right? Just like, oh, everyone thinks that AI agents, right, like need to go inside these games, but right now they're just like living on Twitter or something like that, right? That's kind of like basically what stage we're in, right, with the metaverse. It's like we're all living online already. We're just not like, right, it's just not, we're not like perceiving it in the way that, right, like, we would think of with the metaverse. But I think that's the initial, right, like fertile soil that's needed, right? It's just us spending more time online, spending more time on screens, um, and then you know, and we're starting to, right, develop the system of property rights, right? That's why, right? It's like, okay, we're spending more time online, we're getting system of property rights. Okay, like these are, right, I think like the two of the core components that are going to be needed. And then the VR space and headset space I'm less familiar with. I'm less like a believer that that is one of the core requirements, right? I kind of would challenge, right, that that is like a core requirement of that metaverse. I think like for me it's just like when people are spending tons of their time online and having real socioeconomic connections with people all over the world, right? To me that's kind of like, the early proto metaverse, and we're starting to see that emerge. um and then yeah, I think what comes after that is, we'll have to see.
Indeed, we will. Wanted to just hit on a few kind of like closing questions. What would you regard as the most impactful digital experience you've ever had?
Well, the first thing I ever did on the internet was play StarCraft with my cousins in Korea. So I think that was important because from an early age, I knew that games could be a portal into a new technology. I remember, yeah, StarCraft, right? Like using dial-up to play Diablo. Like I literally, if my dad had to have a work call, I couldn't play Diablo, so I'd have to go to my friend's house or just not play. Um, so yeah, I think those like formative early experiences with BattleNet, right? Because like think of BattleNet in 1997, 1998. That's literally the best thing that exists on the internet, right? That's the best application of the internet at that time, right? Like what is competing with it is like, right, like very primitive versions of America Online, right?
I love that. I love that. And yeah, kind of adjacent. What is your favorite video game ever?
I would have to go with like with vanilla WoW. 'Cause that's the most like slash played I have in anything. Um,
Nice.
so yeah, that was a special experience. Like I felt like I was raised by my WoW guild. So I beta tested in 2003, and started playing right when vanilla came out, and I was one of the first four level 60 warriors on my server. And then they're like, yeah, we're running this thing called Molten Core. Like it's gonna take a long time. And so I just joined up, and somehow I ended up in like top horde guild in vanilla. They were called Overrated. So yeah, that was like a formative experience for me. So I would have to say wow. Like some other runner ups would be Ocarina of Time, which is just beautiful. think it was like my second grade year was really defined by that. And then yeah, like my first game was Donkey Kong Country, so I remember like playing the hell out of that game as a child.
Nice. Dude, that's dope about your WoW career. Peaked early on. That's dope.
Yeah, like I always say that if I ever right, like have time, that's the thing that I've sacrificed is not being able to just like play some MMO as much as I want. So.
Yeah, they're amazing to get lost in. Yeah, finally, wanted to ask, what is the most impactful or important book that you've ever read?
Book. So yeah, I think this will be a good one. So this book there's a book called The Mystery of Capital. It's by this guy named Hernando de Soto. He's a Peruvian economist. I actually know him. Somehow like I kept speaking about him on podcasts, and one of my friends was right. He was like, "Oh, I'm gonna get to know him," and somehow like we manifested it to the point where I've met him. I've been in his house. So he's a Peruvian economist. Basically, he specializes in property rights. So he wrote this book, The Mystery of Capital, which basically asserts that there is no such thing as capitalism, socialism. There is only property rights and lack of property rights. And basically, right, like this manifests in, for example, South American countries, right? You might think that it's a free market economy, but let's say you're a farmer and you're doing well as a farmer. You scrounge a little money together and you're now ready to build a factory, right? You want to do something else. So you go to the bank and you say, hey, like, I want to start a factory. I need a loan. I have this amount of money, but I can put my land up as collateral. And they're like, okay, like, yeah, sure. Give us your deed. And then the founder is like, what? What is a deed? Like, no, I've lived on this land for generations. Or like, okay, like, well, you need to somehow get a deed. You go to the government and it takes, you have to bribe them to basically get this deed, right? Or it takes years. He basically asserts that all these little, right, like inefficiencies and bureaucracies and red tapes are actually the things that prevent capitalism from, or free market economies from flourishing in a lot of emerging markets across the world. So what, why was this important to me? Is like, well, when I learned about NFTs, I was like, oh, this is just a digital deed. This is property rights on the internet. So even though it was just like CryptoKitties at that time, I was like, okay, this is at least like actually has the potential to be more sophisticated than than most of the economies on Earth, especially in developed markets at that time, right? So that's also helped me understand that probably like the countries that are going to be using crypto on a day-to-day basis or very early on, before right this whole thing is built out. A lot of that right everyday user is probably going to be in countries that lack sophisticated systems of property rights, which lo and behold, right, like the inflation rate in a country is highly correlated with their right like propensity to be interested in Web3.
Super interesting, man. I'll have to dig into that one. Sounds well worth the read. Well, Jiho, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you for sharing a ton of hard-earned insights from spending years in the on the front lines of this whole gaming space. Yeah, it's a pleasure chatting, pleasure learning from you, and very excited for all things Ronin as you guys open up. Is there a date you can share yet? Where are we at on that front?
Well, it depends on when this will come out, but yeah, we're looking at like basically next week, and it's February 5th right now. So.
Okay, cool. Love it. Well, Jiho, thank you once again. Looking forward to all to come later this year, and yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Awesome, man. Yeah, thanks for having me.